Hi everyone, greetings from LA. I'm Trae Holland and I'm grateful and really honored to spend some time with you today. When San first shared with me this theme of hidden figures, I was really excited. My first reaction was, oh, I really love this. And here's why. I think a lot of times when we read the Bible and we look at the women in the Bible, we just see them as a story and not as real life. We really have so much in common with them. They were ordinary women just trying to figure out their daily lives. How do I live? How do I navigate my family? How do I navigate my faith? They were married, they were single, they were widowed, they had financial and health issues, they lived in uncertain social, economic, and political times, and they were also separated from the men in just about everything they did, in their private life, their public life, and their religious lives. And then Jesus begins to teach, and they start to learn and experience God in a totally different way. And they, just like us, saw God's heart for them through Jesus. And my hidden figure today is Mary of Bethany, and we know her. We've all heard this story about Mary and Martha and Lazarus. They were a well-known family that lived in the village of Bethany, which was about 2 miles away from Jerusalem. And in John 11, verse 5, it simply says, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. What a description. I mean, Jesus just loved them. That's how we thought about them. And today we are briefly going to look at 3 moments that Mary had with Jesus. And my prayer today is that God will just inspire your heart to move just a little bit closer to him, because he always wants to be just a little bit closer to you. And the word I want you to remember today is heart. As I was studying this, I was struck by the fact that Mary's legacy was not what she said, but what she did. It was her heart. In her 3 moments with Jesus, Mary's words were only recorded once, but her heart spoke very loudly for all time. And I think it's a good reminder for us to remember that it's just not our words, but it's also our spirits that leave an impression on people and those around us. So let's dive in and look at this first moment with Mary and Jesus. In the first moment, we see Mary's hungry heart with Jesus, her teacher. In Luke 10, in verse 38 through 42, it says, as Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed them into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, it doesn't seem fair to you. Doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about, and Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken from her. This is a familiar passage about the sisters, Martha and Mary. And honestly, it says that Jesus and his disciples, which was a minimum of probably 13 people, were coming to their house. I mean, really, that's a bit to do. That's a lot of cooking. That's a lot of cleaning. That's a lot of setting up. That's a lot of rearranging furniture. That's a lot of things to do. But in this chaos, Mary pauses with everything going around, and she chooses to linger and to lean in. Her spiritual heart was really hungry to be with Jesus, our teacher. And Mary made a bold choice to break all the norms and just sit at Jesus' feet. Remember, the men and the women were separated. Women didn't sit and learn from the rabbis. But when Jesus came to her home, Mary was like, I am not going to miss this. I am not going to miss this. I'm just going to sit right here and I'm going to learn. And Jesus welcomed her. And Jesus welcomed her just like he will always welcome you. I think sometimes we can forget that Jesus is always wants to welcome us. Wherever we are in our faith, however long we've been a Christian, or however short we've been a Christian, however strong we are, however weak we are. If I'm doing really well, if I'm discouraged, if I'm happy, if I'm having the time of my life, Jesus is always going to welcome you. And I love this picture of Mary just sitting at Jesus's feet in silence, just listening, lingering in a position of humility so she could just look up and see who he was. Her heart was hungry. She didn't want to miss this chance to feast on every word that Jesus had. I'm sure she'd heard about Jesus. I mean, Bethany was only a couple of miles from Jerusalem, so I know she knew about the teachings and she'd heard about him. But here he was right in front of her, and she said, I'm going to sit down here and I'm going to listen because my heart is hungry and I don't want to miss this opportunity. In John verse 6 and 63, Jesus says, the words I speak to you are spirit and they are life. I also love that Jesus said Mary discovered something. You know, every day we have to silence the daily noise to hear Jesus's voice. And so now I have a personal heart check-in for you, because as we go through these moments, we're going to look at Mary and Jesus, and then we'll have a couple of heart check-ins. So the first one is, how consistent have you been with your heart feasting in Jesus's presence? Not a quick snack, not a grab and go, not a hurried meal, not grabbing something and then moving out the door, but a lingering, soaking everything you can about Jesus' time, looking up at him to see, to get a perspective. You always get a perspective when you look up at Jesus. You always get a different understanding. As if I'm looking out, I just see the world. If I look in, I get really depressed. If I look out, but if I look up at Jesus, I get a different perspective. Has your spirit been quiet enough, silent enough for heaven's voice to be louder than the world's? What do you need to turn down? What does it look like for you to linger in silence? What have you discovered about your heart this past year? And we know this past year has been, there's really no words to describe 2020 and even part of 2021. For me personally, 2020 was a very loud year. Personally, I had to turn down a lot of things so that I could hear Jesus's voice a lot more. I had to turn down social media. I had to turn down the news cycle. I had to turn away from some unhelpful and unedifying conversations, and even some relationships I kind of had to put a little boundaries on. I turned up the quieter times in the mornings and my moments throughout the day because my spirit was feeling really stressed about a lot of things. I found more time to sit or to walk outside, to look up, to enjoy the creation. I mean, you guys live in Hawaii, so you know what it is to enjoy the beautiful creation, but still, you have to be very intentional to do that, because again, we can get very busy with our lives and then we miss all of God's good around us. I had to put in more music, more quieter times and pauses in my days. And in those moments, I would just sit and ask God for your perspective. God, give me your insight. God, give me your wisdom. Give me answers or comfort. And my times with God was different this past year. It wasn't always chapters in books, because really it was just a verse or a word that would get me through the day or help me to understand or help me to have a different perspective. And I would pray and meditate on these things. Just a few examples. In Isaiah chapter 18 and verse 4, in the Voice version, it says, "Because the Eternal One told me, I am in control, calm and serene. I am watching quietly from above." And I would meditate on that. God, you're in control. You see all the racial injustice and the social injustice, and you hear the hearts and you hear the pain and you see everything happening in the world. You hear and you see, and you are calm and serene, and you are watching quietly from above. And that gave me hope. Psalm 38 and verse 9, it says, "You know what I long for, Lord. You hear my every sigh." And a lot of times my prayers are like, God, you know what I long for. I've told you this I've told you this 1,000 times. And I know you're you and I'm just me. But you know what I long for. You hear my every sigh. And that gave me comfort, because God is listening and leaning into my heart. Psalm 131 and verse 3, it says, "Wait, Israel, for God. Wait with hope. Hope now, hope always." And God would always meet me in these moments. He would give me a different perspective. He would give me an encouragement, people, conversations. But these are things that I would just meditate on. And sometimes when you're trying to figure out how to linger and sit at Jesus's feet, it may not be big chunks of things. It just may be a word or a verse or a song that you just sit and let that marinate your soul. So the second moment, we've talked about Mary and her hungry heart with Jesus as her teacher. The second moment is Mary's broken heart with Jesus, her high priest. In John 11, verse 1 through 44, it talks about, and I want to encourage you to go back and read it in its entirety. I don't have time to read all of that today, but this is the story of Lazarus. And the brief backstory is that Lazarus, her brother, had fallen ill, and Mary and Martha sent for Jesus, but he delayed for 2 days, and Lazarus died. When Jesus decided to go, his disciples objected, saying, "A few days ago, the people in Judea were going to stone you. Why would you want to go back?" I'm like, this is not a good idea. These people are going to kill you. But Jesus knew he was going to do a miracle, and the potential obstacles didn't stop him. So he went back. And when Jesus arrives, Martha goes to meet him in deep grief, and then Mary. And this is the time that Mary's words are recorded. So we're going to pick up the story in John chapter 11, verses 32 through 36. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her were also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, Where have you laid him? And they said, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. So the second time, again, Mary's at his feet, but this time in deep anguish and sorrow, a spirit of utter abandon. Her only recorded words in the Bible were full of questions and doubts and pains, and she gave Jesus everything. Here's my broken heart. I don't even know what else to say to you. If you'd been here, this would not have happened. And basically saying, why didn't you come? Where were you? Jesus, my brother died. And Jesus responded as both God and man. He knew the miracle was coming, but they didn't. And he wept for them, and he wept with them. And they never responded. And I think about this passage in Hebrews 4 and verse 15. It says, This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testing that we do, yet he did not sin. Jesus understands our broken hearts. The Bible simply says that God is close to the brokenhearted. And in that moment, Mary was like, I have nothing else but you. And what can we say about 2020? What can I say about 2020? My heart has been broken so many times because of the world and national events, conversations within and without, and within our church and without and outside of our church, because there's been world conversations, and we're people that live in the world. So all those conversations, obviously, we have the same conversations in the church. And my soul has been shifted, and it's been stirred, and it's been shattered, and yet God always provides hope. Because again, I'm going back to those verses, and I'm thinking, and I'm praying, and I'm asking, and I'm seeing God's good. We recently had a brother share for communion that it was a really very moving and inspiring time. He's a respiratory therapist, a frontline worker. So for the past year, during the pandemic, he's been working these grueling 12, 14-hour shifts. And as a respiratory therapist, of course, he's putting people on ventilators. And he's watching people struggle to breathe. And he's watching them die. He's also married to an amazing woman, and they have 3 beautiful children. And their family really is a treasure to us in Turning Point, and we love them forever. And he's white, and she's black. And so in the midst of all the things that are happening at work, when he goes home, they're having all these other conversations in the home about race and what this looks like and what this feels like, and how do I navigate this with my family and with my kids and my coworkers and all of those things. And his communion, he talked about, I asked God why. Well, I don't understand why. And at the same time, he was very grateful for the answers that Jesus gave. I know that we've all suffered changes and loss in this most recent season. And, I think it's important to remember we can be brokenhearted, full of doubts and questions, and still be close to God. So here's your personal heart check-in. What has broken or troubled your heart of late? What obstacles did God remove to meet you where you are? Have you asked him your hard questions? Have you consistently fallen and stayed there at Jesus' feet to ask him for help? How do you give God your broken heart? I don't have an answer for that. I don't, because every soul in each life is different. I read this quote that I think is great. It says, we are all in the same storm, but not in the same boat, because we all have different souls and different lives and different things that are happening. But a couple of things that have helped me as I've been trying to navigate these deeper waters of my heart. To one, remember, is one of God's names is El Roi. It's E-L-R-O-I. And it means he sees you. He sees you. And it's taken from that context when Hagar ran into the desert and she's like, I'm done. I'm just going to lay here and die. And the Lord came and he spoke to her, and she says, I'm going to call this place, I'm going to call you from now on El Roi, which means you see me. So wherever you are today, because everybody's on a different pace and a different path, and they have different things going on, God sees you. And the other thing that I would consistently go through this past year is Philippians 4. I kind of breathe these prayers all throughout my day. It says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. It's the end. It's the end. So I would have a lot of worries. I'm like, God, okay, here I am again. I would just like to say, I know I just talked to you about 20 minutes ago or just at lunchtime and it's only like 30 minutes later, but I have this worry. I feel very anxious about this. This disturbed my spirit. I feel sad. I feel mad. I feel hurt. I feel hopeless. I feel overwhelmed. The world was changing last year and God was in control of all of these things and he saw those things, but it's my first time going through a pandemic. So this was all very new for me. And so I would pray, but then I'm like, oh, I need to do this other part too. Tell God what you need and thank him for what he has done. Because even in the midst, which I'll talk about later, even in the midst when things are going really crazy, God is good and he's always there. And there's always something he's doing. And there's always something to be thankful for. So as you are going through these things and you give God your broken heart, look for him to move on your behalf. And just like Jesus' heart was moved and he wept for her and with her. God is close to those that are brokenhearted. So far we've seen Mary's heart at Jesus' feet and she's hungry and she's wanting to learn. And then we've seen her at Jesus' feet where she's mourning, and we have one more moment. This last moment is Mary's heart of worship with Jesus, her Lord. The third time she's at Jesus' feet, this third time. So it's a pattern. The only time that we see Mary in the Bible, every time she's at Jesus' feet, every single time. I'm like, I need to spend a lot more time on my face and on my knees. But this time she's overflowing with gratitude. Again, no words, just tears of gratitude. What did she say to Jesus, who raised her brother from the dead? 4 days dead. That story goes on to say that Martha said, God, Jesus, you can't go in there. He's been dead for 4 days. He's really stinky now. You can't go in there. But Jesus still raised him from the dead. So 6 days before Passover, before his death, after hearing about Jesus' teaching and sitting at his feet and seeing the miracle of her brother Lazarus being raised, Mary believed and she worshiped. There's 2 accounts of this, so we're going to read a little bit of both. In John 6, verses 1 through 3, it says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at the table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Mark 14 and verse 4, it says, the other account, it says, there were some who said to themselves indignantly, why was the ointment wasted like this? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And they scolded her. But Jesus said, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you will always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. So 2 phrases stand out to me when I read these accounts. The first one is, the house was filled with the fragrance of her perfume. And the other is, she did what she could. We don't need to save the entire world. I mean, we do, all of us people, but I individually cannot save the entire world. But you can love and care for the people and the hearts that are in your path, doing what you can and lighting up the lives around you with your light. I'm reminded of one of our community groups that have been meeting consistently during the pandemic. They met outside, socially distanced, masked, this whole time. But the spirit, the fragrance of their group is one of being warm and welcoming. They consistently have 4 to 5 guests, ranging anywhere from a girl who's in her 20s to a woman who's in her 70s. People have become Christians. Their neighbors love them, come to them for advice. They are a light to the people there. They are a warm and a welcoming fragrance to them. So when I think about our personal heart check-in for this one, I'm also thinking of the remainder of our time spending our time with Jesus in worship. So Think about what has God done for you in 2020 and in 2021. We can very easily think about all the things that have happened during the pandemic. I mean, I can write a book, right? You can write a book. But think about what has God done for you in 2020 and 2021. What has been the fragrance of your life? What fruit of the Spirit best describes it? The perfume that it's filled the entire house of the people around you, in your heart, in your home, at work. I know we're working remotely, but people in your street. What has been the fragrance of your life? How has this fragrance of your life encouraged others? What has moved your heart to an overwhelming gratitude? Because the more grateful you are, the more your heart overflows. And Mary, when she came to Jesus this last time, the only thing that she had was gratitude. What do you say to Jesus who's raised your brother from the dead? I don't have words. All I can do is give you all that I have, this very expensive perfume, and just tears of gratitude. And sometimes our gratitude is such that, God, I just don't have words to say how grateful I am for all that you've done for me. And again, 2020 has been crazy. 2021, there's been some moments as well. But still, I always know that there's God's goodness. I always know that God is good. And I give thanks. And that mindset for me of giving thanks is different than even being thankful, because giving thanks for me means that I'm actively saying something, or I'm actively doing something, or I'm like, I give thanks in this situation. So, a couple of things I give thanks for. I give thanks for the daily life and the health that I have. I give thanks for the 20 plus souls that were baptized or restored during this pandemic, some of whom I've never met. People who are baptized that I've never met in person. They studied over Zoom, and they would sometimes meet in parks and socially distance the whole thing, but I haven't personally met them maybe until recently. I give thanks for all the weddings that I've witnessed in the pandemic. We had 3 couples that were planned their dream weddings, and because of the pandemic, it all changed. But it was a joy to see how the church rallied around them. It was special, it was amazing, and it was beautiful because it was, based on love and faith. I give thanks that in this past month that we had 3 elders appointed in Turning Point. We had 1 before, Mike Upton, but in this past month we've had 3, and 1 of which is my husband, Kevin. And so that marks a big moment of maturity in our life. We've been here in Turning Point for 28 years. We've raised our family here. And so for the church to go from 1 elder to 4 is very encouraging in terms of the maturity of our church. I give thanks because we were able, during the pandemic, to hire 2 amazing next-gen couples. God just kind of gave them to us. I'm like, oh, who hires during the pandemic? But we were able to hire two couples. And personally, I give thanks because after 18 months, my youngest daughter found an amazing job, more than we could ask or imagine. But she'd been steadily looking for 18 months for a job. And, God is big in the church in terms of He answers all these prayers, and people are becoming Christians, and things are changing, and people are moving in, and we're hiring people and appointing people. And then God's very specific in our family, in our nuclear family. So I'm very happy for her. Our first grandchild, Mia Love Hinton, was born on May 12th. So it's amazing for me to be able to witness that personally. I give thanks, and they live locally, so I get to see, I've seen her. She's 13 days old. I've seen her almost every day. My new name is Gigi. So I'm very excited about that and very grateful, but it's an amazing thing to be able to see this circle of life. I give thanks for God's daily grace, His mercy, His goodness, His forgiveness, His faith. He is always good. He is always good. And, as we are closing out, I want you to think of these things. As we are thinking about Mary Bethany in her heart, may we have hearts that are just like hers, hearts that are full of hunger, hearts that are willing to share our brokenness with God, and hearts that are overflowing with worship. Love and grace to you all. God bless you. Aloha. I love you. Bye.
Hey ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. And if you have not, go ahead and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Once again, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!